Rain has a way of making everything look different. It was 11:45 at night when the pounding started. Not a knock, not a polite request for entry. It was a desperate, frantic hammering that shook the frame of my front door. I did not move at first. I sat in my living room listening. The storm outside was relentless, but the noise at my door was human. I checked the security camera feed on my phone. 2 figures stood on my porch, huddled together, soaked to the bone. A man in an expensive suit that was now ruined, and a woman clutching a designer handbag like a shield. My parents. David and Lisa. I had not seen them in 4 years. Not since the funeral. Not since I stood in a cemetery surrounded by nurses and friends, but not a single member of my own blood family. They had not come then, but they were here now. I walked to the door, unlocking it slowly. I did not turn on the porch light. I wanted them to see me in the shadows. I opened the door just enough to look out. They were shivering. My father, the real estate mogul who used to intimidate bank presidents with a single glance, looked small. My mother, always perfectly put together, had mascara running down her cheeks. "Megan," my father gasped, his voice cracking. "Please, you have to let us in." I stood still, blocking the entrance. "Why?" I asked. My voice was calm. Too calm. "The feds," he whispered, looking over his shoulder into the dark street. "They froze everything. The accounts, the assets. They are coming for us in the morning. We need $180,000, Megan, cash, tonight, or we go to prison." I looked at them. Really looked at them. The audacity was breathtaking. The people who had refused to pay for my son's life-saving treatment because it would disrupt their liquidity were now standing on my porch begging me to save their lives. Drop a comment and let me know where you are listening from right now. I want to know who is standing with me in this community. To understand why I did not immediately slam the door, or why I did not invite them in with open arms, you have to understand the math. Not the math of their debt, but the ledger of pain I had been keeping for 4 years. It started in a sterile waiting room in Nashville. My son Caleb was 8 years old. He had his grandfather's eyes and a laugh that could fill a room even when he was hooked up to machines that beeped and hummed. He was fighting a rare autoimmune disorder and his body was attacking itself. The doctors told me there was hope. Experimental gene therapy. It had a high success rate, but insurance called it elective. They would not cover a dime. The cost was $125,000. I was a pediatric nurse. I made good money, but not that kind of money. Not quickly. So I went to the only people I knew who could write a check like that without blinking. My parents. David and Lisa. They lived in a gated estate that looked more like a fortress than a home. Marble floors. Vaulted ceilings. A garage full of cars they rarely drove. I remember sitting in their living room clutching a folder of medical documents. I explained everything. The success rates. The urgency. Caleb did not have months. He had weeks. My father sat back in his leather armchair swirling a glass of scotch. He looked at me with a kind of detached pity, like I was asking for a donation to a charity he did not particularly care for. "It is not a good time, Megan," he said. "Liquidity is tight right now." I stared at him. "Tight, you? Just bought a vacation home in Aspen." "That is an investment," my mother chimed in, smoothing her silk skirt. "This is different. Besides, we have Madison's wedding coming up. You know how expensive Italy is this time of year." Madison, my younger sister, the influencer, the one who needed everything to be perfect. She was planning a destination wedding in Lake Como that was rumored to cost $350,000. "Mom," I said, my voice trembling. "Caleb is dying. This is not a vacation home, it is his life." "We cannot just pull money out of the wedding budget," Lisa said, her voice sharpening. "The deposits are non-refundable. If we cancel now, we lose the venue. We lose the caterer. Do you know how hard it was to get that villa? It would be a disaster." That was the moment I realized something profound. It was not that they did not have the money. It was that they had already spent it in their minds. To them, the wedding was not just a party. It was their identity. It was proof of their status, their success, their relevance in a city that valued flash over substance. Psychologists call it cognitive dissonance. When your self-image is built on being perfect, anything that threatens that image becomes the enemy. A sick grandchild, a messy tragedy, a desperate daughter, we were flaws in their design. We were inconvenient. A wedding in Italy was beautiful. It fit the narrative. A dying boy in a hospital bed did not. They chose the image over the reality. They chose the picture-perfect moment over the messy, painful work of saving a life. They looked me in the eye and told me that their social standing was worth more than my son's heartbeat. I left that house without the money. I drove back to the hospital, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I felt a coldness settling into my chest, a numbness that would eventually turn into armor. I knew then that I was on my own, and I knew that I would never ever forgive them. The wedding went ahead as planned. Of course it did. Invitations on heavy cardstock with gold leaf lettering. A website featuring engagement photos taken on a yacht. My sister Madison posting daily updates about her dress fittings, her floral arrangements, her excitement. 3 days before the ceremony, while they were sipping Prosecco in a villa overlooking Lake Como, Caleb died. It happened in the quiet hours of the morning. The machines did not alarm. They just stopped. The silence that followed was the loudest sound I have ever heard. I held his hand until it grew cold. I packed his things into a plastic bag. I walked out of the hospital into the bright, blinding sunlight of a Tuesday morning, and the world looked exactly the same. Cars were driving. People were drinking coffee. The sun was shining. But my world had ended. I called my parents. I called Madison. I left voicemails. I sent texts. Caleb is gone. They did not call back. They did not fly home. They did not cancel the reception. Instead, I watched their Instagram stories. I saw my mother raising a glass in a toast. I saw my father dancing with the bride. I saw Madison twirling in a gown that cost more than my car, laughing, glowing alive. They posted photos with captions about love conquering, all about the most beautiful day of their lives. They erased us. They simply pretended that the tragedy back home was not happening. It was easier to ignore the death of a child than to let a shadow fall over their perfect celebration. I planned the funeral alone. I sat in the front row of a small chapel staring at a tiny casket covered in white lilies. The room was filled with nurses from my unit friends, from college neighbors who had brought casseroles in kindness, but the front pew on the right side reserved for family was empty. I looked at those empty seats and I did not just see absence. I saw a choice. I saw the counterfactual reality, the life that should have been. If they had written that check, Caleb would be 12 today. He would be starting middle school. He would be leaving muddy footprints in my hallway and complaining about homework. He would be alive. That empty space was not just sad. It was haunting. It was a physical manifestation of their betrayal. They had traded a lifetime of potential for a weekend of applause. They had bought a party with my son's future. That was when the grief hardened into something else. It stopped being a wound and became a weapon. I stopped crying. I stopped checking their social media. I went back to work. I picked up extra shifts. I saved every penny. I rebuilt my life brick by brick in the silence they left behind. I became a ghost to them. And now 4 years later, the ghosts were knocking at my door. I stepped back from the door, letting the storm blow into my entryway. My parents hesitated, as if waiting for an invitation for a hug, for some sign that the past was forgotten. I gave them none. I simply turned and walked into the kitchen, leaving the door open just wide enough for them to follow if they dared. They shuffled in dripping water onto my hardwood floors. They looked around my home, a modest, clean, mid-century modern house I had bought 2 years ago, with wide, frightened eyes. They had never been here. They did not know I lived here. They did not know anything about me anymore. David started talking before he even sat down. It is all a misunderstanding, Megan. A witch hunt. My business partners, they got jealous. They cooked the books. They pinned it on me. The IRS, the FBI. They are all involved. They froze the accounts this afternoon. We cannot access anything. Not even the credit cards. Lisa was weeping softly, dabbing her eyes with a wet cocktail napkin she must have pulled from her pocket. It is humiliating, she sobbed. The neighbors saw the agents. They took the cars, Megan. They towed the Mercedes right out of the driveway. I leaned against the granite counter, crossing my arms. And Madison, I asked. Lisa pulled out her phone. She is in Dubai. A brand trip. She is hysterical. She held up the screen. Madison was on FaceTime, her face swollen, her makeup smeared. Megan, she screamed through the speaker. You have to fix this. My sponsors are dropping me. People are commenting on my posts calling us criminals. You have to give Dad the money. You are a nurse, right? You have savings. Fix it. The entitlement was so pure, so untouched by reality that it was almost impressive. They were not asking for help. They were demanding a bailout. They truly believed that my role in this family was to be the safety net they could ignore until they fell. I need $180,000 by 9 a.m. David said, his voice trying to regain some of its old authority. My lawyer says if I can make restitution on the specific account they flagged, I can avoid immediate arrest. I can stay out on bail while we fight this. It protects the family name. The family name. That was still their priority. Not their relationship with me. Not the memory of their grandson. The name. I looked at the clock. It was 12:30. I cannot just write a check for that amount in the middle of the night. I said, my voice flat. I need to see the paperwork. I need to know exactly what I am paying for. We brought the files, David said, gesturing to a plastic bin he had carried in from the rain. It is all here. The ledgers. The notices. Just write the check, Megan. You owe us that much. After everything we did for you growing up, I owed them. I stared at the bin. I did not see a mess of papers. I saw a trap. Fine, I said. I will look at them. You can stay in the guest room. It is small, but it is dry. Lisa looked at the hallway, sniffing. It smells like antiseptic in here. It smells like clean, I said. Go to sleep. I will let you know in the morning. They went into the guest room, closing the door. I waited until I heard the bed springs creak. Then I sat down at my kitchen table and pulled the bin toward me. I was not going to write a check. I was going to conduct an autopsy. The house was silent save for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional sound of thunder rolling in the distance. I opened the plastic bin. It was a chaotic mess of bank statements, legal notices, and hastily scribbled notes. It smelled of stale cigar smoke and panic. I was not looking for assets to sell. I knew there were none. If the feds were involved, everything tangible was already gone or frozen. I was looking for the timeline. I wanted to trace the rot back to its source. I started sorting. 2019, 2020, 2021. The years of the wedding. The years of Caleb. I found the wire transfers for the villa in Lake Como. $50,000 for the deposit. $20,000 for the florist. $15,000 for the fireworks display. The numbers blurred, each one a slap in the face. They had spent more on pyrotechnics than I had needed for the first round of Caleb's treatment. Then I found something else. A manila envelope tucked at the very bottom, stained with coffee. It was labeled Estate Planning, Grandfather. My grandfather, David's father, had been a hard man but fair. He had passed away 5 years ago. I knew he had left money, but I had been told it was all tied up in trusts I could not access until I was 40. I had never questioned it. I was too busy trying to keep my son alive. I opened the folder. Inside were monthly statements for a trust fund titled The Grandchildren's Medical and Emergency Trust. My breath hitched. I scanned the balance sheet. 5 years ago, the balance was exactly $150,000. The terms of the trust were explicit. The funds were to be used solely for medical emergencies or catastrophic needs of the grandchildren. I flipped the page. 4 years ago. 2 weeks before I sat in their living room begging for help. 2 weeks before they told me they had no liquidity. There was a withdrawal slip. The entire balance. $150,000. Transferred to the general operating account of my father's company. I stared at the signature line. It required 2 signatures. One from the trustee, my father, and one from the beneficiary if they were of age. The signature was there, Megan. It was written in blue ink. A looping, confident script, but I had not signed it. I had never seen this document in my life. I pulled my own checkbook out of my purse and laid it next to the slip. The difference was subtle but undeniable to anyone who looked closely. The slant was wrong. The loop on the G was too wide. They had not just refused to help me. They had not just chosen a wedding over my son. They had stolen the money that was legally set aside to save him. They had forged my name to drain the fund meant for Caleb and then used that exact money to pay the catering deposit for Italy. The realization did not make me scream. It made me go ice cold. It was a clarity so sharp it felt like a blade. They were not just narcissists, they were thieves. They were murderers by proxy. I took a photo of the document. Then I texted my contact, a forensic accountant I had befriended during my own financial recovery years ago. I found it, I wrote. Come over. Bring the notary. I sat back in the chair and watched the sun begin to rise. The rain had stopped. The world was gray and quiet. I felt a strange sense of peace, the kind of peace that comes right before you pull the trigger. Morning broke with a pale, watery light. I brewed a pot of coffee, the sound of the grinder loud in the quiet house. My parents emerged from the guest room looking like ghosts of their former selves. David's shirt was wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot. Lisa looked frail without her makeup, her hands trembling as she reached for a mug. So David asked, his voice rough. Did you find a way? Can you cover it? I gestured to the kitchen table. Sit down. Saturday. They looked hopeful. They saw the checkbook lying on the table. They thought they had won again. I picked up 2 pieces of paper. I placed them face down on the table. I can help you, I said. I have a settlement from a malpractice suit I filed years ago. It is exactly $180,000. David exhaled a long, shuddering breath. Thank God. Megan, thank God. You are saving the family. You are doing the right thing. I did not smile. But there are conditions. Conditions? Lisa asked, bristling slightly. We are your parents, Megan. I flipped over the first piece of paper. It was the check, made out to the Department of Justice. I flipped over the second piece of paper. It was the photocopy of the forged withdrawal slip. The silence in the room was absolute. It sucked the air out of the kitchen. David stared at the signature, his forgery, and his face went from pale to gray. You stole from me, I said. My voice was not loud. It was conversational. You forged my signature. You drained the trust fund that grandfather left specifically for medical emergencies. You took the money that could have saved Caleb, and you used it to buy truffle risotto in Lake Como. David tried to speak, but nothing came out. Lisa put a hand over her mouth. That is not what happened, David stammered. We borrowed it. We intended to put it back. It was an investment. It was theft, I corrected. And identity fraud. And insurance fraud. I picked up the check. I am offering you a choice. One choice. I will give this check to the lawyer who is pulling into the driveway right now. He will deliver it to the authorities to cover your immediate restitution. You will avoid arrest today. You will stay out of prison for now. But I continued, leaning forward. You will sign a full confession admitting to the forgery. You will admit in writing and on video that you chose to use those funds for a wedding instead of your grandson's life-saving treatment. And you will sign over the deed to the estate to repay the trust. The estate, Lisa shrieked. That is our home. That is everything we have left. It is not your home, I said. It was bought with stolen money. It belongs to the trust. It belongs to Caleb. You cannot do this to us, David snarled, a flash of his old anger returning. We are your family. I pulled out my phone. I have the FBI field office on speed dial. I can add identity theft to your list of charges right now. Do you want to go to jail in your pajamas, Dad, or do you want to sign the paper? He looked at me. He looked for the daughter who used to beg for his approval. He looked for the girl who was afraid of his disappointment. She was not there. He picked up the pen. His hand shook so hard he could barely hold it. Say it, I said. Before you sign, say it out loud. David looked down at the table. We chose the wedding. Louder. We chose the wedding over Caleb, he whispered. He signed. Lisa signed, weeping silently. I took the papers. I did not feel joy. I did not feel triumph. I just felt done. The doorbell rang. It was the lawyer. I walked to the door, handed him the check and the confession, and turned back to my parents. Get out, I said. But where will we go? Lisa asked, looking around the kitchen as if she had never seen it before. We have nowhere. Not my problem, I said. You have liquidity issues. I am sure you will figure it out. The fallout was swift and brutal. It was like watching a demolition in fast forward. The estate was seized and sold within 3 months. The confession I held was never made public to the press. I did not need the circus, but it was filed with the court. It ensured that any plea deal they made left them with nothing. David and Lisa avoided prison time barely. Their age and the restitution kept them out of a cell, but it did not save them from the cage they had built for themselves. They were evicted from their social circle faster than they were evicted from their home. The new Nashville crowd they had tried so hard to impress did not tolerate failure, and they certainly did not tolerate poverty. They moved into a 2-bedroom rental apartment near the airport. I heard through the grapevine that Lisa tried to join a bridge club there and was asked to leave after she spent the entire time complaining about the quality of the wine. Madison tried to save herself. She posted a tearful video on TikTok claiming she had no idea that she was a victim of her parents' lies. She denounced them publicly. But the internet is an unforgiving historian. People dug up her old posts from the wedding week. They found the timestamp of Caleb's death and compared it to her selfie drinking champagne on a boat. The comments section ate her alive. Her sponsorships evaporated overnight. She was canceled not for what she did, but for who she was. I stood in the driveway of the estate one last time before the new owners took possession. It was empty now. The marble floors echoed. The chandelier looked gaudy without the furniture to distract from it. I walked through the rooms that had once intimidated me. I felt nothing. No nostalgia. No anger. Just the quiet hum of a chapter closing. I had not kept the money from the sale of the estate. I did not want a dime of it. I took the recovered funds from the trust, the money that should have been Caleb's, and I did what I should have been able to do 4 years ago. I launched the Caleb Protocol. It was not a charity. It was a grant program. A specific rapid response fund for families facing the exact nightmare I had lived: experimental treatments denied by insurance for children with life-threatening conditions. We paid the bills that insurance refused. We wrote the checks that saved lives. In the first 6 months, we funded 3 treatments. 3 children who would have died were going home. 3 mothers did not have to beg. 3 empty chairs were filled. I stood on the porch and looked out at the manicured lawn. I had not burned their house down. I had taken it apart brick by brick and used the pieces to build a shelter for someone else. I had turned their greed into a legacy. I had turned their perfect day into a lifetime for others. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the grass. I turned my back on the house, got into my car, and drove away. I did not look in the rearview mirror. I had work to do. If this story moved you, share it. Let us remind the world that family is defined by who shows up, not just who shares blood.